A number of people in my game group have been unavailable recently for one reason or another, so I've been thinking a lot about two-player games. And I don't mean games that are for 2 to 4 players or 2 to 5 players that are played with 2, but two-player games. Because games made for groups of people that just happen to be played with 2 are still mostly about building up something. You are trying to get more points and better your position relative to everyone else. Whereas in a two-player game, often it is me against you, and I'm just trying to tear you down because that's as good as building me up. It's all our relative positions, so I can still come out on top just focusing on destroying you. So one of the games that has been coming out is Riftforce, a great little two-player game, battle game where you're trying to take down the opposing player's forces. It's very straightforward in terms of what you're trying to do. And in case you happen to be in the same position as me, I thought you might consider this game as well. So let me explain how it works. Here is Riftforce set up and ready to play. The game includes 10 guilds of elementals. You choose one guild at random during setup and draft the remaining 3 for your team of 4 guilds, which means that 2 guilds are not used in any particular game. There's some randomization, so you cannot have the same set of guilds necessarily anytime you play the game. Each guild has a set of 9 cards, 4 that are 5s, 3 that are 6s, and 2 that are 7s. The numbers are the amount of damage points that an elemental can absorb before it is killed. Your goal is to be the first player to score 12 points, and you are going to score points by eliminating opposing elementals and by controlling one of the locations and the other side being empty. You have forces at that location, the enemy does not. Super. Good for you. We're set up and ready to play. You're going to take one of 3 actions on your turn. The only action I can take on my first turn as the first player is to play cards from my hand onto the locations. I can choose a number or a guild and play up to 3 cards of that type. So I can play these 3 5s, or these 3 6s, or this 1 7. Of course, I can choose just 2 6s or 1 6. I can choose the 3 earth creatures or the 2 vine creatures. You have lots of options for what you might want to play. And when you put the cards down, you are going to put them either in a single column in any location of your choice. You choose the order that you put the cards down, or you're going to put them in adjacent locations. You cannot split them. You cannot stack 2 and put the third to the side. It's either all in one location or spread out across the locations. And let's say I do this. The earth elemental has a power that when it comes into play, it does 1 damage to each elemental in the opposing side, on the opposing side of that location. So there we go. First blood. The other player goes. They can activate a creature in play, they can activate up to 3 creatures in play by discarding a card from their hand and activating up to 3 creatures of the same guild or the same value. So they could discard this 5 crystal and activate this 1 light creature. It would do 2 damage to my elemental and heal 1 damage on any ally, which it's the only ally on this side right now. This damage would go away. Or perhaps you want to build up forces. You choose these 3 6s. You decide to lay them out here to oppose me. And the reason why you might want to do that, let's say you did this instead. On my turn, I can check and draw. If I have fewer than 7 cards in my hand, I refill my hand to 7. And for each location that I have a creature, at least 1 creature at, and you have none, I get a point. So I'd refill my hand to 7 and score 2 points immediately. You probably don't want that to happen. So you're going to set up forces against me. I can still check and draw, refill my hand to 7, but I would score no points because nothing is happening. There's no opposition that's going on here. I could activate, but I have no 5s. I could discard a 6 and activate the earth. I could discard this vine to activate this one. I can't activate the air at all because I have no 5s and no air. Little stuck right now in terms of what choices I have available, but let's say I just want to slam down lots of earth. We're going to do it like this. So 2 more earth come into play. They do 2 damage to each creature in this location. And there we go. Starting to do something. So let's say this player wants to put down these crystals. I can play this 7, but that's not going to do very much. Maybe I want to draw. And I realize that when I draw, then my opponent might draw as well. And if they do, they gain 2 points. Or maybe they want to activate something. And this is the choice that comes up again and again for how you want to do things. Are you going to put more forces out? Are you going to activate what's already there to try to nibble away at what is going on? Or is it time to restock? Take a little breather turn and refill. Let's say you decide to attack rather than refill. So you activate either the 2 light or the 3 6s. If you activate the 6s, the lightning creature does 2 damage to anyone at this location. So you could do 2 and 2 and 2. Maybe you want to hit the ice because ice has a power that is special compared to the earth. Talk about that in a moment. This one does 2 damage. Oh, we already did the damage. And it heals 1. If this creature gets 2 more damage, it dies. And the earth all do 2 damage to a creature. 2 damage to the first enemy at a location. So if I activate any of the earth, this creature will die. The ice, on the other hand, it does 4 damage to the last creature in a location if it already has damage on it. Otherwise, it does 1. So, the challenge for you, do you want to heal 1 on the lightning on the assumption that I'm going to activate the ice, or heal 1 on the light on the assumption I'm going to activate the earth? It's not necessarily a right answer. You don't know what I have in my hand. I have a 6 in my hand, so I can activate the ice either way. Because I've got a 6, I can activate the earth. My choices are open. But you do something. And now I'm going to choose something. I can play more cards to defend here because I still don't want you to score points. I can try to fight back. These creatures are already roughly half value. Maybe I want to do something with them before they die. We're going to continue play. Now, let me back up a few turns. Way back to the beginning of the game, before I play anything. I'll put all this back in your hand. I'll put all these back. We're just rewinding the clock. You can have a very different sort of game experience depending on how you play out the cards. Let's say I play out only these 2 5s on my first turn. All right, I'm either bluffing that I don't have a third 5, or I have something I want to use that third 5 for. So I play these. The earth still does 1 damage. Okay, you do something. Let's say you still lay out these to provide some defense so that I don't score points if I refill my hand, to let you score a point if you refill your hand. And now I activate 5s because I have 2 5s out here. You choose the order that you activate them in. So I could choose Earth. It's going to do 2 damage to the first enemy at the opposing side of that location. And then the Vine, place 2 damage on the first enemy at an adjacent location. So I do 2 damage here, boom, this dies, I gain a point. All right, there we go. That's already a different feel for what's going to happen. I don't have more forces available, but I already have a point, and your goal is just to get to 12 points. You could refill your hand immediately, you'll score a point because you fill this area and this is empty. Or you can press your advantage, maybe you're going to play these 2 7s, and give yourself more opportunities for what you can do next. I don't know that you don't have a 7 in your hand. I could assume you do. I have to do something. If I let you refill right now, you're going to score 3 points. I probably want to put something out to defend. And we're going to keep taking turns back and forth until someone gets up to 12 and wins. The other forces that you have available, you have a crystal. The crystal hits for 4 damage to the first enemy on the other side, which is a lot. 2 hits will kill anyone. However, if I kill your crystal, I get 2 points for it instead of only 1. So it's a big hitter, but it has disadvantage. Fire does 3 damage, which again is a lot and will kill at 5 or 6 in 2 hits, but it does 1 damage to the first ally behind it. So if you stack these like this and you hit with fire, then your crystal would take a damage. That is not the order you want to put them in. You probably want to put them in this order so that now fire doesn't have anyone behind it and does no damage. Lightning does 2 damage. We already ran through all that in my earlier example. All right. Nice. Air. I didn't play an air creature. I did play an air creature before, but I didn't show you what it did. Air moves to any other location, and then it does 1 damage to the enemy right across from it, as well as the first one in the adjacent location. So it's a little scatter shot enemy, which works well with ice because air is going to do 1 damage to each thing over here, and ice does 4 damage if the last creature in a row has damage on it. So as long as you don't put something there to cover it up, and I can activate the ice, this is going to take 4 damage, which again is a lot. So the other 2 that we didn't show, we got water, do 2 damage, and then water moves to an adjacent location and does 1 more. Okay. The shadow creature, it moves anywhere other than where it is. It's the ninja essentially. Does the damage to the first enemy, and if that creature dies, you earn 2 points for it. So it does not do much damage, but it can go anywhere else and then deliver that last blow. You keep playing until someone gets to 12 points. You finish the round so everyone has the same number of turns. If there's a tie, play through another turn. Play through another turn. Eventually, someone will be ahead and win. I played Riftforce 6 times on our review copy from Capstone Games, which is the US licensee from Austrian publisher One More Time Games. This design by Carlo Bordolini is fascinating. It gives you a lot to think about as you are playing. It is also somewhat frustrating, primarily because you will probably make many mistakes as you are learning how to play. After 6 games, I still feel like I am just barely getting started with having any idea what I am doing, and that's partly because of the confusion that can come as you are mixing guilds together on your side of the battlefield. Some guilds are fairly straightforward. The crystal just hits for a lot of points and you want to protect it. The fire hits as well, and you don't want anything behind it. That's straightforward. Okay, light does 2 points of damage and heals something. That's pretty straightforward. But then you start getting into things like the vines that does 2 damage to the adjacent location and then pulls a creature over, or the ice that does 4 damage to the creature at the back of the other location, but only if it's damaged. Otherwise, it just does 1, which possibly sets it up for a hit of 4 next time, unless the opponent plays something over it. You start getting complications of trying to work out how everything is going to do its job in the best manner possible. Because sometimes you'll pull something over with the vine and then realize you just pull it away from the thing that you want to hit it. But if you hit it first, then that does nothing as well. So if you have the vine and the ice next to each other and you want to hit the ice, but it doesn't have any damage yet, and you're like, well, I can pull it over with the vine, but then it's not in front of the ice anymore, and there's no creature there, so it's not going to do anything. And you're like, I should have played those cards differently. But that was like 2 turns ago, and you can't go back and undo what you did. And so you just have to live with it and think about it for the next game. And I find that I'll play with a set of cards and then I want to play again immediately because it's like, okay, now I've figured out, I think I have a better idea of how I'm going to play them. Earth does 1 damage when it comes down. And so you're like, well, I kind of want to hold on to Earth. I want to wait and so I can strike at once. And if my opponent puts a few cards in the same location, then I can hit all at once, possibly with up to 3 Earth and drop 3 damage on each of them, which will set me up for future gains. But of course, the opponent knows that's possible, and they'll play around that if they are paying attention, or you don't set up a threat that they need to respond to. There was a lot of back and forth among the players for how you're trying to set up traps that may or may not happen depending on what you have in your hand and depending on what you draw and depending on what they have available and how they're going to respond to you. And the game has a great feel of two forces kind of pushing against each other. You have 5 locations. You're usually not a threat in all the locations evenly because the opponent's going to attack back and they're going to slash at your force. You're going to slash at their force. And you're each going to gain something. And you can imagine this line of 5 places that's sort of undulating back and forth with these forces coming to hit again and again. And I find Riftforce a lot more fascinating than, for example, Unmatched, which I know lots of people love. I've played Unmatched only 3 times. And if you're not familiar with the game, you have a hand of cards that have certain effects on there. You're moving creatures on paths, and you're trying to kill the opposing creature. Okay, you can play in teams as well, but I've only played 2-player games. And when I've played, I find the movement sort of superfluous and weird. Like, why am I dodging in and out? I guess you might have close attacks, you might have ranged attacks. It depends on what character you are in any particular game. But playing 3 games of Unmatched, I realize it doesn't give me a good idea of what you have in the deck, what you can do, and how I can respond. And I haven't internalized all that. And I need to play more, possibly, to get a good feel for it. But in the games I've played, it often feels like I'm just dodging to the side, and then I come in and I try to do something, and then I dodge out. I come back in again and I do something. And it feels sort of haphazard and random. Like I'm not planning towards anything, or I'm not trying to build anything. Whereas again, Riftforce has this sensation of forces like waves coming against one another and pounding on one another, and they keep moving back and forth as you change the tempo of the game over time based on what you're playing. So it gives me a lot more because there's threats often coming in all places, in all locations, and then I'm trying to push back on all of those and build up. It gives a better sense of a real battle than just one character fighting one character. Again, taste change. Perhaps you love Unmatched, and you could convince me to love it if we were able to play it enough times to really get a feel for what that system is like. But I've had a lot more success, a lot more satisfaction from Riftforce and just trying to assemble those forces. And I think part of it is because in Unmatched, you have different card powers in your hand. And if we have not played a sufficient number of times, I have no idea what your cards even do. I have no idea what to anticipate or to plan for or to play against or what you're bluffing to do. There's none of that going on. Whereas here, every fire creature you have, every earth, every shadow, whatever you have, it all has the same power. And I know what 4 guilds you have. I know the powers that you have available. I don't know your particular hand, but I know what you have on the board and what is possible. If you play a 6, you can activate any of these. If you play an earth, you can activate these. If you play a crystal, and so on. I can gauge a bit better what you can possibly do, and then I can take countermeasures to either try to strengthen a certain position or occupy an area that I think you want to score just because your hand's getting low. Maybe you're going to opt to refill your hand and score points rather than attack. And so I want to refill. Or you just laid out new forces and now I want to pick away at them before you can build up too much strength. There's much more of like a call and response effect to the game and this ebb and flow. And again, it all plays out in like 20 minutes. And there's a randomness to what you have in your hand. Definitely. You have to account for that because you might not even have 3 6s to put down. You might not have 3 of a guild. So what are you going to play? Sometimes you'll get this draw and it'll be like, I drew 6 6s in my opening hand, which means I can play 3 6s, I can activate them again, and just keep pounding with those same cards, assuming the opponent has not eliminated them. And that'll be very different feel from a game where I can only play these two, and then I can only play these two, and I'm not sure if I want to activate them. I'm just going to draw. So you have this very different dynamic range of how the games play out, just based on the draw of the particular hand and what the opponent is doing and what guild combinations you have. It all comes together in this interesting dynamic way and gives you a challenge for how you are trying to respond to what you're given, the forces available to you, and what the opponent is doing, what you're doing. I have to account for both of those things together and also try to look at your face and figure out what's available to you. So there's a lot going on in a very short game. There's a lot of range available. And I feel like I'm only barely scratching the surface of what's possible with 6 games, with particular guild combinations that come up. And there's already an expansion announced that has 8 more guilds, so that's going to be even more possibilities down the road. I don't know, maybe that's a barrier to you because there's so much you could possibly play and encounter and try to learn for how all the particular guilds work together best. I don't know. It's a good challenge to have, I suppose. So thanks very much, Carlo Bordolini, for designing this game. One More Time Games for publishing it. Maybe you give it a try if you find yourself in the same position as me, one other person against the table who you want to beat on.